Hello everybody, can you hear me? About to make a start. Okay, well welcome everybody to my webinar where I'm going to be in conversation with Mark Britz. And before I introduce Mark, I just want to say a few words about the webinar itself. I'm going to be using GoToWebinar, but unfortunately the chat functionality isn't as open as it could be. So what I'm going to suggest is that if you want to talk about the webinar or even ask Mark some questions, use Twitter as our back channel and use the hashtag SLCwebinar to do that. And as we go through the webinar, I'll try and feed in any questions to Mark that you might have. Okay, so now let me introduce my guest, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Mark Britz here today. Now, I have to say I've never actually met Mark in person, but he's somebody who I feel I really know quite well from my online interactions with him. I read his blog and I follow him on Twitter, and he's one of the practitioners who impresses me with how he's trying to incorporate all these new social approaches into his work. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and he's going to share with us particularly his work in the use of social media for onboarding. So let's get started then, and welcome Mark.
Hey, thanks, Jane. Glad to be here.
Great to have you, Mark. And what I'm going to do, Mark, now is make you the presenter. So if you want to show us anything on your computer, you can do so. So I'll pause a little bit while I do that. So then you can, your computer is ready for you to show whatever you want to do.
Sure.
Oh, there we go. You can see the first slide, so everything seems to be working great. Okay, Mark, so let's start a little bit by finding out about you, who you are, where you live, a little bit about your career, and what you do now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jane. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me today. I think it's a great opportunity for people like myself who are trying to employ some of these various approaches in their organizations to get an opportunity to share that and share both the successes and the struggles that we all face. I hope people will be able to pick up on some best principles throughout. Every situation is different, but maybe you'll be able to draw from my experiences through this. Again, my name is Mark Britz. I work for a company called Aspen Dental Management in the United States. We're based in Syracuse, New York. And what Aspen Dental does is we build dental practices for dentists. So we manage most of their HR functions, the training function, of course, accounting, so that dentists themselves can execute their craft without that overhead. My role here is I'm the manager of learning solutions, and it's a relatively new title in the last couple of years. And as much as it sounds kind of lofty, it's an interesting transition for the company, and kudos to us because focusing on learning solutions as opposed to a lot of titles that emphasize the training function, and that's exactly what I do. Is we try and look at more of the informal and social in the company, and that's kind of my focus, is to try and build those channels or enhance that capability. So I've been here about 4 years. Prior to this, I worked for a couple e-learning companies as well as Pearson Digital Learning. And I'm a former classroom teacher. I got my start in public education. So I like to joke that I was kind of raised by Madeline Hunter and Robert Gagne over the years. But made the transition to e-learning and learning as a whole in corporate organizations in about the year 2001. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know you a lot about that, but you being a teacher and so forth, so really interesting. Okay, so why did you decide to use social media as part of your onboarding in your current role?
Yeah, I think like anything, and I'll probably reinforce this point, as one of the things I try to promote a lot is the fact that social media is a tool. And, one of the things tools do is solve problems. It can build, it can destroy. But generally speaking, to look at this as a possible solution to help with our onboarding. And, it's ironic, real quick, I'll just tell a quick story with this image. I don't know if it's come up yet. But about the time that I've started focusing on onboarding, was the same time I was training for a triathlon, and that's me in the front there. And it's a kind of funny picture because the individuals that are looking in my direction are probably laughing because I'm the only one not. It was honestly problems facing companies, so effectively onboarding. And one of the things that we were suffering with is and all of our people are having something else, Jane, I'll share with the group is, I have to say I'm a little subversive in the fact that I think, like everybody who's probably in this webinar today, is the fact that we all believe in connecting our workforce is fantastic undertaking will ultimately have huge impact. And, we need to focus as businesses around the results, and what lies beneath it all is the greater benefit. So. Recently, we just got done, Jane Bozarth and I led a Learn Book group talking about people do. And he really speaks at length about the need to release Trojan mice. And it was kind of validating for me because that's exactly what this undertaking was. It was looking at particular problems with particular solutions around social learning and the various tools at my disposal to say, can we start chipping away at this slowly to build to eventual more embracing the idea of social business one problem. Does that answer the question for you, Jane?
Yeah, can you hear me? I've got a few sound problems.
No, no problem. Okay? I can hear you, Jane. You're a little bit muffled, but I can make you out.
Okay, I've had to move on to my iPad because I have problems with my computer. But anyway, yeah, that really, yes, that was great. So what approach did you take to all this, and why did you go about that in the particular way you did?
Yeah, I'm gonna skip. I got a couple images that can kind of support a little of this, and I think generally the approaches were kind of twofold. So again, talking about Aspen and our needs. The first pain points that we had was in what we call our office manager training program. Every office has what we call an office manager. They're not a clinician. In fact, their responsibilities are around managing the office as well as making the consultations with patients. So we have a lot of new employees who come in as we are growing a company of upwards of 15 to 17 per class. And in the past year, we had over 13 classes. And it's an interesting structure. It's a blended approach because it's blended between classroom training of about 3 weeks. Here, what we were finding in those formal trainings was the fact that there was a great deal of inconsistencies happening between what was experienced in the field and taken back into the classroom. So our trainee experiences vary greatly as we try to tighten it up a little bit in that field experience. So, the first approach that we looked at was in that realm. So the business, what's happening in that field experience to bring it back to the classroom so that our trainees are a little bit more consistent in what they're learning, when they're learning it, and how they're applying it. And one of the first things we employed in that particular problem was the use of blogs. And interesting enough is the blog that we use is through SharePoint. And if people are familiar with SharePoint, a lot of their tools aren't necessarily the greatest in collaboration. But my argument, again, kind of thinking about you, and is, let's use some of the free things that we have at our disposal to at least build the mindset, and see if when the wheel squeaks, we can then add oil to it. And so with the blogs, we were able to kind of launch an initiative where the trainees would in fact narrate their work. It took a little while to get there, but the idea was when they were in the field to leverage the blog to talk to each other, keep in constant contact with their trainers, but more in an open space to share what the happenings were so that we could make adjustments. So it became a great tool for formative evaluation during this critical period for them. And, again, I think one point is that it was really the emphasis to put kind of community as the cornerstone of the onboarding program. So we wanted to make sure that they were welcomed into their work group out in the field, but also maintain a constant connection to the more centralized training initiatives to make sure that consistency was there.
Welcome to GoToWebinar. Web events made
We
easy.
didn't advertise it as something to be. I'm hearing some feedback. I don't know if you're getting that, Jane. Yeah, I'm going to keep going only if I make sure that I'm being heard, I guess. But generally, it was, we had this right problem, we had the right audience, and what we needed to do is make sure that the social media that we were leveraging wasn't viewed as social media, and that term that we toss around too loosely has some negative connotation. And so it was really just laying it out in the forefront as one of the main components was, here's your blog. And we're going to be using this to collaborate throughout the entire program. So it was a very casual approach of introducing it and then pulling people into it. And our trainers, who weren't necessarily social media savvy themselves, grew over time to be those community facilitators and really stepped out of the role of kind of their approach of being a little bit more direct, instructional, and moved to more, asking a lot more questions and allowing the pause while they're in the field for the trainees to reach amongst themselves to answer a lot of those critical questions. I think the greatest asset to this effort was the fact that it really was about exception handling. Those unique situations that were taking place in their field experience that they definitely could not have been trained for. They could leverage this community of peers who were experiencing the same growth pains they were to not only just commiserate about some of the issues, but also find the answers to their problems quickly within a trusted group.
Okay, so what's been the impact on learning then generally?
Yeah, I think that it's one of those things, Jane, where it's very much about the impact being more about the community that grew. That prior to using these particular tools, these folks were quite isolated into these field offices and really had no connection, which ultimately affected their morale. And it did have a great impact on the formal program because, again, like I said, it had a formative evaluation feature because now the trainers who were involved in these collaborative discussions could get a better handle on what the experiences were for each trainee as they were narrating their days and the activities they were engaged in to make sure that certain particular sequential activities were being accomplished. And if they weren't, they could make adjustments in the program very quickly so that it kind of right-set the ship for them and allowing them to stay motivated in the program, not become extremely frustrated, identify problems in a particular office that it might not be the ideal setting for that trainee. And without those tools in place prior to this, it was only through one-to-one communication or a quick phone call that by the time they could make the adjustment, it was too late for that particular trainee.
So why did you use different tools and not a single platform?
Yeah, and I want to talk to, well, first of all, SharePoint, again, it was my first effort with this, and it's still ongoing today. Because of the nature, as it kind of becomes a terminal project, it lasts for the time. We use the blog only as a tool through a training class, and then we hope to roll them into a larger collaborative with more veteran peers to collaborate, and we're moving that way now, a little bit slower than I'd probably like, but we're getting there. Again, this particular tool was free. It was a good experiment. People were comfortable with it. It was already within our intranet, so I didn't have to worry about ramping up too many people because they were comfortable internally to kind of promote it. The other solution that we've been working with to stay away from a holistic platform even though it can be considered as such, was the use of Yammer, which I'm sure most people out there at this point are familiar with. We had an issue, also another problem that arose with our rapidly growing recruitment team. An executive on the recruitment team, the director of recruiting, came to me saying, I'm hiring about 10 more recruiters in the next 3 months. They're excellent recruiters. They currently work for other organizations, but they don't know our business. They don't know our business model. They do not know how to recruit dentists into the practices. But his pain point was he needed them producing. He needed them recruiting, and he was looking for me to help him develop a training plan for them. And that's when I introduced the idea of using Yammer. And what we found is he was really excited about Yammer right away when he saw that I was using the freemium version of it. He said, let's buy it. He understood the power it had through some of the examples I shared. And long story short on that is that we were able to leverage Yammer internally to connect the more veteran and seasoned recruiters that he had with the new hired recruiters, so they could come up to speed more quickly. The exercise, actually, to start this process, we began with a wiki, a pretty basic wiki, where I asked the executive to gather from his most senior people what were the most common questions that a new dentist would ask a recruiter. And so we used a wiki to capture over 85 questions that these senior folks had experienced. And what ended up taking place is we rotated that back around to the field, and other senior recruiters answered those questions. And as painful as it was, the executive saw all this collaboration and realized some of his more senior people were providing false information, and they didn't have all the information. So he was a little bit shocked, angry at first about this, but again, it was without that tool, he never would have known. He never would have known the pain points that he was having in his most senior people. And we were able to create then kind of a living knowledge base that we used to seed the Yammer community with, and allow that to exist as a what they call a Yammer page. I'm not trying to promote Yammer here, but you can actually create a page in there. It functions like a wiki that people can follow. So now they had a knowledge base of the most common questions and answers that they could build upon in this collaborative community. So over time, we were able to get the folks involved pretty quickly. And the effort I undertook to do that was I used what was known as a frame game by Tyagi. And it's called Improve Solutions. And it's basically paper-based. And you take some common problems and you let people collaboratively discuss these in a formal setting. And so we did this exercise when I had about 2 hours with every single recruiter here in Syracuse. And when they went around and solved these problems in a collaborative manner during the course of this exercise, I was able to take all the paper documents they produced and just kind of maybe overly dramatic, I threw them in the garbage. And my point to make was the fact that the information that they created here, if we only use email, if we only use the phone, that information goes away. And we don't have access to it. We cannot build upon it. As we know, knowledge is much more fluid. So the point was made of why we should use this tool and not emphasizing necessarily the how-to. And then we eventually walked into the basic features of it. And over time, with them playing and experimenting, we've seen the dramatic results in the rapid onboarding of these new hired recruiters as they tapped into these veteran people, just-in-time learning as they faced upcoming interviews with dentists. They were able to capture information quickly from their peers on the best practices in those situations.
Well, thanks, Mark. I mean, Leslie asked a question earlier on, which you might have really sort of covered, but how did the newbies cope with social media? Did they already have skills, or did you have to kind of bring them up from scratch in terms of understanding how to use the tools, or in general, or in specifics?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It was a mixed bag. We definitely had a few out there who are more familiar using Facebook as the primary vehicle, very few people on Twitter. So I can't say there was an overarching comfort with it, but again, the Yammer tool, especially the mobile application for it, was critical because the app itself is pretty simple. They were used to text messaging. They were used to using emails on their devices. So with that 2-hour span we had where I could walk them through and set up their accounts, give them a chance to play, and that keyword was play. It was hardly training at all. It was more about just giving a chance for this room full of people to talk to each other through Yammer, see it up on a large screen, see it happening, see the impact it could have, and just having these dialogues. And honestly, I mean, maybe there's a little bit of luck in there for me because it really picked up because I think they instantly saw the value.
Thanks, Mark, for that. That's good. I'm just watching the Twitter stream here. So if anybody has any questions for Mark, please pop them in the stream, and I'll try and feed them into him. So what about the tools? What about success measures? How have you been measuring success of all this?
You know, at this particular point, it's been measures related to some of the pain points of the executive. For example, my executive who brought it to my attention about building the training plan is now that he's onboarded these 10 new recruiters with the 16 or 18 more seasoned ones, we eliminated completely the need for any formal training. They were able to learn more about the business structure, about our dentist needs to answer their basic questions without having to be seated in a formal classroom. They were out there in the field. So it's an easy discussion to make because there was no expense or time commitment to any type of classroom development and delivery. The tool fit the need of using it for social learning. So up until this point, and we've been that Yammer network, we started onboarding them through the Yammer network, has been in existence for just under a year, and they were fully capable of doing their particular jobs for Aspen within a matter of about 3 weeks. Our first recruiters started engaging dentists and never had to step foot in a classroom. Another interesting stat, if we're counting kind of butts and seats measures, is that between May and February, when I took a look at the data, it really showed that there was a group of about 26. There was over 1,600 posts. They were using Yammer as their primary communication tool.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I mean, Jay asked a question about, do you use any microblogging? Does the organization have a social network? But I guess that's how you define microblogging. I would probably call Yammer microblogging, but how do you define it? What would you say to the answer to that, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I mean, microblogging is those kind of quick messages. I think Twitter is kind of the standard when we talk about that. But what I found was fascinating with using the blog was you have to take it out of the mindset that it's going to function as a true blog. And when we use the blogging tool in SharePoint for our newly hired office manager trainees, we didn't really set it up with any preconceived idea of individual blogs for each of the trainees. It was one blog for the whole class, and we just opened up their ability to post as authors and to comment. And it's a fascinating point you bring up because that's exactly the volume of posts and comments that happened in there were really small Twitter-like messages between folks, and our trainers would delve deeper into helping these trainees kind of tell more of a story periodically. But a lot of times it was simply them posting an insight, it was them posting a question, sharing an answer, helping each other find resources. So this bigger, what we call more a heavy social media tool was really being used for microblog.
Thanks, Mark. Great answer to that question. I guess we've talked a lot about where you've done it and measuring success. So do you have any real sort of like lessons you've learned you could share with us?
Yeah, for not best practices, I think I can credit both Clark Quinn and organization and our needs are a little unique, but the image I'm on the screen right now is a Venus flytrap, and I think it summarizes a little bit of the first part of my approach. The lesson learned is, it's waiting for that right problem. It's enticing key stakeholders with a solution that eases their specific pain points, and then just reaching out and grabbing it. So again, it was a patient approach to start this march, I'd like to say, towards more social business. And as we're building small successes, even in just an onboarding into, we're starting to see that the Yammer network right now it's expanding. It's allowing other people to come into it now because they want to tap into these resources. But it started with a business problem. It started by looking at social media as a tool to solve particular problems. That's one piece to it. The other piece I'll mention is kind of supported by this image is new hires in a lot of ways need to kind of be protected. And one of the things is they don't want to be dumped into a huge pool where they could come across maybe as not as knowledgeable as they hope to be or make a mistake early. But I like this because it really kind of reinforces the point. We've got to kind of let them warm up to the waters. And so with the Office Manager Training Program, the trainees were 15, 18, 20-some folks in one exclusive, airtight blog tool and didn't have access to the whole company, just access to each other and an exclusive group where they could build their own norms within that group and stay focused without feeling a sense of being inhibited by being seen by a large amount of people. Those are definitely two points that are really poignant for what I was doing. Another thing I want to bring up that I think is important and worked for us is, I started with tools we already had. And, not everybody might have SharePoint. I know it's a common, document management version control tool, but, the image you see on the screen here is from my triathlon. This is, typically what they call a basket for your foot pedals, and it looks like a medieval torture device. But, it's not the greatest in terms of a tool to help you in your pedaling power, but at the same time, it is effective. And so I think SharePoint kind of struck me as that. It's the starting point. And so I like to say, kind of again, as I reference you and Semple, is we kind of start with what we have. Don't focus on the very expensive tools. Even taking a look at a blog and using it more like a microblog, opening that collaboration up as much as possible. Another thing I want to share too is, again, yeah, go ahead, Jane.
No, I have a couple of questions, but if you want to carry on for a bit, that's fine.
No, I can pause for a second. I'd be happy to answer a question. What do you have?
Take some questions before I lose them in the stream.
Yeah, go ahead.
Two questions that have come in, which I think are pretty similar, really. One says, what are you doing to sustain the community that you created for your new hires? And the other one says, how are you transitioning it from a training sort of cohort-based community into a more broader community? So they're probably quite related, but I'd be interested to hear your remarks on that.
Yeah, I think we're, Harold Jarkey talks about it. It's kind of perpetual beta. So, we're kind of twisting a little bit here and there. But one of the things for me is to build those core ambassadors internally. It's not me alone. And, this image, too, I think answers that pretty well, Jane. It's the fact that, our trainers who were not social media savvy, they've become easily my community facilitators, is a better word than community manager. And they had a progression, and their progression and their evolution in this process was, they initially used it as a device to kind of push information out to reinforce classroom learning in the field, asking kind of general questions about application. But over time, they understand with, a little bit of help from me about the importance of building a conversation and seeding conversations and getting people, the trainees, to kind of narrate their work. So again, these particular tools, this blog tool, is exclusive to each training group. And when the training class ends, unfortunately, right now, is we don't roll them into something larger. And it's a little bit painful to watch. It's not something that's been approved just yet, but the data is starting to support, and some of the internal surveys and conversations we've had with trainees who've gone through the program using these blogs is, we've got to open this up. We've got to keep this going to keep that contact there. And obviously, the blogs in SharePoint aren't the ideal situation because they're kind of locked within the firewall. So we want to expand that. So, the plan, a little bit skunks work, you might say. It's a bit, for me anyways, it's a little bit subversive in a way, because I'm working with using the Yammer tools a little bit more right now to kind of introduce it to other groups facing similar problems with onboarding employees in the company, especially in the area of a very diverse workforce, the workforce that's scattered throughout the country. So it'll be, to me, it's how we're going to grow this, how we're going to scale this is, again, one particular group at a time, and it's gaining momentum.
Thanks, Mark. Now, I probably interrupted you while you were talking about your lessons learned and the next steps. So do you want to continue with that?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of alluding to some of that. I want to obviously share a little data if I can, some of the interesting qualitative, quantitative kind of things to show the value that's come across here real quick. If this is showing up on the screen, one of the important points is the fact that this particular image shows that every class that we had in the 10-week program, 92% of all the posts, which averaged about 2 comments per post, were driven by the trainees. So they were very active in using this as the tool to keep in constant contact with their trainees, and where only about 8% of all the conversation or the initiated conversation in the post was by our trainers. So this was definitely very peer-driven when using the blogs, which was really a really important point. Some other things that are value too is just some of their input after the fact. I interviewed about close to 300 trainees who came through and used the blogs, and over time, and what they found was it important to be connected to your class, and they ranked this very high to be very important to maintain that connection. So this was a critical piece for their morale and motivation. And I don't mean to bury you guys with a lot of graphs, but some of this was, I thought, pretty interesting. What was the greatest use of the blog was another question that I had these 300-some folks respond to, and they reinforcement of classroom training ranked extremely high. But most importantly, I think, was the fact of getting answers from a trusted group of people. When you're in an onboarding situation, you're building trust and with not only your trainers, in this case, this more formal use, but also the fellow classmates, to reach out to them first to build context around the learnings that they were having when they were applying them in the field. I just want to share this particular quote with the group if it's up for them. It's these kind of qualitative, feedback that I received. Just shows us that the tools themselves just maintain that constant connection, help them hang on through the difficult times, and they looked for them to continue. And it's interesting here at the bottom of this particular quote is that they state, it directed them in ways which you will help you. And I'm not sure if it's a typo or not, but it is that reflective practice that was happening. And I think it was also important to see that trainees were helping their fellow trainees learn. So by enabling them to, or I should say empowering them to share with each other to find the answers versus leaning on the trainers in particular was a really value add.
Yes, welcome. We need to take a couple more questions.
Yeah, please.
Okay. This one you might have covered really, but perhaps it's worth reiterating. It was about metrics. I may just see if I can find it again. It was asking if you, the metrics that you look for that demonstrated uptake and engagement in this space. Now, you've showed us a few things there, but is there anything you haven't mentioned that perhaps might fall into that? Or are there particular metrics you look to that demonstrate uptake or engagement in this space? And have you increased retention? Erin asks.
Yeah, and actually retention is definitely something I was shooting for. The unfortunate truth is in the past year we've made significant strides in other areas, so it's hard for me to isolate the variables to say how much this contributed to the change. And we've seen about a 3% positive change in retention. At the same time, these tools were being used in these particular groups, but there was also some other factors contributing. So it was really hard for me to isolate and say, oh yeah, this is what did it. But generally, I think what we've seen is that a lot of this is probably one of the most interesting ones too, is once these blogs and these features were done, I had a number of respondents to my interviews and surveys that I did with the trainees in particular to say, how would you like to stay connected? What would be useful ways, this and that. And it was funny because a lot of the groups responded that they left the training blog and started their own private Facebook groups to keep in contact. And I think that's fantastic. That what they've done is they said, okay, the organization isn't at the point to continue this, so we're going to go outside the firewall completely. So most of them here again were heavy Facebook users, and they went right into that to share beyond our walls to continue the collaboration and friendships and community that they formed. And the other piece I mentioned before too is a little bit more about the head of recruiting who now saw that there was no need for the formal training piece. Completely eliminated from the process, from the discussion, and so he's become a huge advocate to explain how this works in other areas. So it's a significant cost savings, that I haven't necessarily quantified yet, but the fact that we didn't have to do it was something I didn't have to engage in at all from my particular role in the organization, and so we find that the tools themselves and the community that really grows out of it is pretty self-serving in helping each other. This might speak to that too, Jane, and that is that I did actually look at some of the information that came out of Yammer. There was, like I said, the Yammer group was different. There was a recruitment team, about 26 members. They onboarded 10 within that group, and there was over 1,600 interactions. And I really looked at them against 3 important points. And these are the 3 things I constantly talk about when it comes to social media, that social media is a tool for collaboration, community, and sharing. And so I looked at every one of those 16 hosts, I should say YAMs, and it was interesting once we categorized them that the breakdown was very balanced. That there was a lot of community interaction, which is more about those friendly interactions that take place that aren't always of a business nature, but they do build those relationships, which are critical to have those collaborative and sharing moments. 36% collaborated, and I categorize that as problem solving. People asking questions and getting answers and building upon those answers. And 30% was about sharing, where they would present information outside of or independent of various conversations, new ideas, and areas, things that might be interesting to the group, or things that can be pulled in more serendipitously, but that were business related. So it was a pretty evenly split in terms of where they put their focus. I thought that was pretty pertinent.
Thanks, Mark, for that. Now another question came in, which is quite interesting, from Greg, which was, what incentives are effective in getting learners to use blogs effectively? Did you have to use any incentives, intrinsic or otherwise?
The short answer is no. We didn't have to use anything like that. We weren't necessarily forcing anybody's hands. Like I said, with the blog feature in SharePoint, we just integrated it right on the front end. So the moment the new hire came aboard and they were presented with new hire paperwork, one of the pieces in there was introducing them how to access the blog, and we'll see you there. And we're going to talk about some of these upcoming events in their training program right here in the blog. And it just became, this is just part of it. This is what we do. So there was never an inkling of fear about using the tools that we've seen out there. Nobody felt any type of repercussion. I mean, I would honestly say, do we still have segments that do a little bit more lurking? Sure, absolutely. But even then, I think the comment's been made that lurking is learning. They're pulling from their peers. We just might not be able to know it. With the recruitment team and using Yammer, they quickly saw the value. Once we seeded Yammer with the 85 questions and answers, they were able to pull from and expand on those and add to. So they have a starting point. So in a sense, that could be considered kind of like an incentive that this is where you're going to find that information. So you better look in there. And it worked out very effectively. That's a great question.
And Jay asked, was Poppers Fishing in the blog 100%? Or did you have holdouts there?
Was it 100%? No, there were some holdouts, and actually it was sporadic. We saw more or less along the lines of about 10-week program. If I graphed it out, the first couple weeks when the trainees were in the field before coming to Syracuse, there was a little bit of not engaging in the blog, and after they had a little more face-to-face time with their peers here, then we saw an uptick. So we started to see more use in the blog after they had an initial introduction to each other and got to know each other on a personal level. They took that back into the microblogging use of the SharePoint blog tool.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Another question in here from Greg. Did you use the questions and answers on Yammer to update the facts? Was there any integration there?
Upgrade the facts, meaning the fact that they got answers wrong initially when we populated. Is that, do you think that's what's meant by that, Jane?
I don't know, Greg. Can you pop into the chat what you meant by your question, and then I'll re-ask it to Mark again in a minute. So let's see what else. We've got a lot of looking is learning type activity. People like that. So did you want to say some more things while I pause and pick up some more questions for you?
No, just going to share on the screen real quick. Just I took a snapshot. I'm not huge into analytics, but they do tell a little bit of a story. This is one of the features in Yammer. It's not extremely rich, but it does provide some insight. And you can see that in April of 2011, we started the program, and you can see that we get the maximum involvement of the posters. As we onboarded folks in June and July, we started to see those 10 people ramp up and in. But the total messages by month was a steady increase. They became more and more active in using this as their primary tool to communicate with their peers and with their leaders here in Syracuse and abroad within Aspen. And I think, lesson learned too, is we were talking about that a little bit, is I think the ease of use is such a critical piece to using any of these tools. Yammer's feature rich, but a blog tool that's not set up to be like a traditional blog is a very valuable resource. It's definitely something that can be used for multiple purposes and not looked upon as a single author type situation to be used. And even with Yammer, again, it has lots of ability to provide people with, in a sense, like badges and different group settings. And when I launched it, I was like, let's not mind those things right now. Let's just figure those out as we go as a group. So the core group, as the new hires came aboard and assimilated with the group, there was a lot more of their use of some of those other features within the tool itself. But it was just making sure that if it's going to be a sticky tool, it has to be relatively easy to use.
Yeah, that's a great visual you got there.
I took some heat for this one at the Learning Solutions Conference, by the way. I got a few more, though, probably jar a few people.
I think a few coming up. Some good some more ones coming up, so I won't preempt those. I'll just ask a quick question while there's a pause there. And Jay said, do you think your success with new hires and Yammer will inspire management to back broader social efforts in your company?
I really do. Yeah, I'm very optimistic. Fortunately for me, it's gotten on the radar. Again, it's finding that those mid-level folks in your organization, your stakeholders who have business needs, that can escalate the conversation higher in the organization. I had a great conversation the other day with my chief operating officer. He's very aware of what we're doing. He's, taking it slow, taking a look at it, but the conversation has started. And I think, again, it starts with solving problems and showing the results of that. And we're a very people-focused organization. And we're sensitive to that, and he's very interested in a lot of the qualitative information as well. So I think he sees the potential. He's been an advocate for the blog use in training, in the onboarding in the training program. He's very aware that we're not filtering, that it's wide open. We're not waiting to moderate comments as they come through. And I really do see this heading in that direction. Slowly, but we're gaining momentum.
Okay, I'll pause there and I'll ask that question again that Greg had. And he said, were there new questions and answers that came up in Yammer that were added to enhance and expand the FAQs that you had?
Yeah. No, once we created the FAQ in a wiki separate than Yammer, and we initially we tagged each of the Q&As that were there. Once we were able to use the wiki to get the correct information, so we cleaned that up first. Then we populated the Yammer with it, and eventually built a Yammer page, and people who play with and know Yammer very well will understand what I mean in particular. But initially it was really embedded in the conversation with the hashtag. And what's interesting is those Q&As have morphed because information's changed. Knowledge, again, is very fluid. Situations aren't always can be answered with the same answer that you had in the past, the same approach, same process. And so the nice thing about using these tools is it keeps that narrative alive. And so people see the growth and the change in the answers and the resources they can draw upon just by a simple search. They find it, and other members of the group are pointing them in these directions as the key reference point.
Right, thanks, Mark. Do you want to move on? Do you have anything else you want to share with us today?
Yeah, I think another image that kind of supports it is the fact that I look at social media tools kind of like this cat. They have the potential to do a lot of good, but sometimes they'll bring it right to your feet, and that is an expectation is that people may say things in social media, these tools that will make you cringe. We have, believe it or not had an issue of that nature at all. And I think the biggest reason we haven't is the policy that I wrote for using the tool. Not as simple as, say, Zappos and their don't be stupid using the tool policy, but definitely focused on the affirmative and focused on the positive, what to do and not what not to do. And, we didn't just leave it as an isolated policy in any of the groups in the use, either the blogs or in our Yammer onboarding. We talked about it. We talked about the policy there. We allowed people to chat a little bit more about what it meant in certain. We only had, I think, 9 particular things within particular points in the policy, and we went through each of those and allowed people to kind of jump in and tell us what it meant by it. But again, most of them were positive. Use this to collaborate. Use this to share information. Use this to connect and build community. And so it became a living policy rather than something you just click and say you agreed to.
Yeah, I think that's a great story to tell because so many people make their policies so negative. So I like your term, the living policy, which I think is really a great way of putting it. So thanks for sharing that one. I think that's an excellent piece of advice for people to hear.
Good. The other thing too that comes to mind is one of the things I really focused in on was building ambassadors early, and these weren't necessarily my most technically savvy folks who knew the tool extremely well, who were really on the forefront of social media. I was just looking for the folks who were passionate about connecting with people, and even though they were stumbling, I'll admit it, some of my trainers were a little hesitant. They didn't have the background, but they understood the power that it could do, and they were willing to listen and work through those issues and didn't let technology get in the way. And those are the people I embrace the most. Passionate and definitely the most empathetic. So my more senior people in the recruitment team who showed an understanding of what it means to be newly hired into an organization, who expressed a desire to help their peers as they came aboard, were the ones I reached out to the most, because I knew that the technology would follow, and the knowledge of the tool would follow as long as I had them passionately involved in, helping with this process for these new hires. So that's another key point I think I found was, the knowledge of the tools will come over time. We don't need to train and rush to it. It's more about finding those people who are willing recipients and understand the power.
Another great visual you've got there.
Maybe I should take it off the screen. I don't know. That's another one that somebody didn't like at the Learning Solutions Conference. I guess it took some heat. And I think this goes to the point of like moving to social business. At the beginning I gave that little breakdown called CARB of challenge, action, result, and benefit. And it's like the benefits are the biggest part in how we move forward. And Harold Jarkey had said these words once, and they really resonated with me, that culture is an emergent property of the many practices that happen every day. You change the practices, and the new culture will emerge. And we've often heard that it's about the culture first, and then if the culture becomes more community-focused and collaborative and sharing, these tools can really take hold. And I'm finding that I wouldn't say we're definitely the most collaborative culture at all. A growth company such as ours, we do get into our silos, but it's just the opposite. I'm finding that working to solve these individual problems using these tools are changing the practices of people, and they're realizing when I can connect with people with knowledge and experience much more quickly, we're finding that people are growing into a collaborative mindset in these individual small areas. So I like to believe that use of the tools in these systematic ways can help us change the culture.
Thanks, Mark. Any more questions, anybody? I know Mark's probably drawing to the end, so if you have some questions for him, now's the time to start getting them into the stream so I can ask them before we finish in about less than 10 minutes now. Yeah. Okay, Mark, over to you again.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, I think that's the point I really want to reinforce is, yeah, we're solving problems associated with bringing new people and new blood into the company, and we're doing it in a way that says it's okay to share here, it's okay to collaborate, it's okay to put yourself out there with these small cohorts of people, and it's building a different mindset as these folks kind of infiltrate the business, knowing this is how I started in the company, let's keep it going. So it becomes a springboard, is my hope, a springboard to social business, where our company becomes ever more greatly connected using a variety of tools in the process. So again, I'm not married to Yammer, but I'm finding it very valuable in these efforts. I know that our SharePoint blogs have some limitations. I know the wikis have some limitations, but they are a start, and it's starting to become part of the vocabulary.
Yeah, I think you made that point very well about starting small, but just get started, really.
Yeah,
you've got to start somewhere.
Yeah, it takes me back to Ewan Semple's work, and I highly recommend his book to everyone. If you didn't see that Learn book we recently did, Jane and I led with Hoot Course. Organizations don't tweet, people do. It's a fascinating read. It's a quick read, but it does open up your mind to a different way of approaching it. As I know, there's a lot of pressure out there in terms of some circles to get to social business quickly, but the point is Trojan mice, as he stressed, and it's really a variety of different tools, and really change some of the mindset that's happening through the use of these tools to solve specific business problems. And that's a great thing to talk about too as I wrap up. As Jane and I finished that book club. If you haven't been involved, it's fantastic because you get to interact, obviously, as we know, on a global level, talking about a book, and a variety of questions are posted. But the unique thing about it was maybe a third of the way through the book, Ewan himself joined into the chat. So he was able to asynchronously join in via Twitter and help us understand a few of the points he made. And he clarified some points, and it just really enriched the group. And I don't think you're ever going to see that in any other type of medium.
No, absolutely not. That was really fantastic thing that happened there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, to get back to sort of brass tacks, as we say, Leslie asked the question, which many people are probably thinking, did you have any problems with IT department, or did you get them on board early? Or did you, was it Skunkworks and it went under IT's radar?
Yeah, I hope nobody's listening. We did. The blog piece was, we had access. These tools are already in SharePoint, so there wasn't much control through, IT to question it. We started small, a couple classes. We ironed out some wrinkles, but really there was no IT involvement because of our level of access and using these tools. And then, of course, Yammer is being used completely outside the firewall right now. Again, a very small pilot effort that allows us to build momentum, show some critical information and data that eventually, if we wanted to purchase, move it within the enterprise, I think we're building a case to be able to do that. So we have not, and maybe I'm lucky, but it's definitely the fact that IT hasn't really been involved. We are having conversations. I haven't been, totally remiss in my responsibility, including everybody. But it did launch. My COO asked me to head up a social media committee within the company. So IT is at the table with us to talk about, where we're going next. So it's become a little bit more collaborative as they've seen what we've done, and they feel a little bit reassured by some of the security features that they have. But the data supports that so far, there's no issues.
That's great. And another unfortunate question here is, did you have problems with marketing and communications department?
Actually, this is actually helping to influence a change within marketing structure. It's fascinating. Up until this point, we have a communications director. It's a very top-down communication to the field, and this, the use of the blogs and Yammer and the microblogging has changed the mind a little bit about how we can do this more casually, to connect with the people in the field without that corporate feel. They've been intrigued by the way the trainers themselves have become less formal in their use of the tools, and it's influenced them now where they're talking about the use of blogs at the executive level. So there's never been necessarily a problem. I think that they've kind of peeked in and said, how can we leverage this ourselves to open up a back and forth communication, a two-way communication with our field, which has typically been one way.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Clark, to sending me a tweet to tell me to look into the GoToWebinar chat questions, because I hadn't been looking in there because we've been doing it through Twitter. So let me just see if there's anything interesting here that I should be picking up. There's a question here. What was more valuable, SharePoint or Yammer?
Well, different audiences, and I guess we have to say what do we mean by value. I honestly would say that looking at, I think the use of Yammer for the recruitment team and its more measurable impact of completely eliminating the training need would show the most value that way. Like the trainees who are in the OM program using the blog has its value in the fact that for the trainers, two things. One, like I said early on, it was a way for them to take the pulse of the experiences in the field to make sure things are being done so that people don't fall off the radar and fall off track and come back to the Syracuse classroom underprepared. So there's a lot of value in the formal sense and definitely a ton of value in the informal piece through learning through their peers with Yammer. I'm on the fence, I guess, in terms of saying which one added the most value, but they're both very well received and very much alive in the organization. So there's value within, sure, both.
Okay, and then I guess we're up to half 7 now. So the last question for you then, Mark, is what's next for you? Was it onwards and upwards from within Aspen, or are you on to new things?
No, I got a lot of work to do here. I think we're taking this to the next level. My next stop is, taking a lot of this qualitative and quantitative information about the value. I think, as everybody knows, employee engagement is a hot buzz issue right now. The connected workforce is becoming more focused. Our CEO is very sensitive to reputation management within the company, and here's a chance to say, let's start talking about how we get other groups within the company connected, because we are, in our organization, I said that we're a national presence, and we're definitely decentralized, but we want people to be able to communicate more in this hierarchy fashion than a hierarchy. And so we're going to keep advancing both these initiatives and look at better ways to promote the use of various tools.
Okay, well, Mark, thanks so much for participating today. I know from reading all the Twitter chat, everybody's been really amazed by what you've been doing, so thanks so much for sharing it with us. And I guess just remind people, one, that this has been recorded, so I'll put it into the Social Learning Center shortly when it's done. And of course, you've got a group in there, so if people want to continue the conversation with you, Mark, they can go there and ask some questions.
Yeah,
so
and by all means, yeah.
Once again.
Yeah, by all
I'm sure
means.
you're very happy to ask questions. Sorry, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, by all means, I'll be on Twitter @Britz, and you can follow me there, ask me questions, follow up there. I'd be happy to answer as we go forward.
Right, thank you so much again, and we really appreciate your time today, sharing everything with us. So just to say that next month my guest on the 23rd of May will be my colleague Jay Cross. So I'll keep everyone posted in the usual channels how to reserve your place for that webinar. But thanks again to Mark and to all of you for listening and participating in the back channel. So thanks. I think it's been a very successful webinar today. So thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks, Jane. Bye-bye.
Bye.